tend to lean, so I don't want to lean the other way.
Sorry, I'm ready.
He leans with
Okay.
it before he rocks it. True.
Okay, so we all know the deep, dark, kind of deepest, darkest place that you can come from, and that's where Dracula comes from. When we think about Dracula, we think about the guy, like the one who sucked your blood kind of guy, and he just kind of roams around, does what he wants, kind of sold his soul to the devil kind of thing, and it was like, hey, I want eternal life. But why did he do this? Why would he want to do this? To know exactly how Dracula works and how he kind of does things, we kind of look at this guy called Vlad. He's kind of a prince. He was later named Vlad the Impaler. Early history about Vlad was he was a prisoner of the Ottoman Empire with his brother. And his brother loved being a prisoner. He learned all new things and everything, but Vlad kind of hated it. He was like, oh, why am I here? Why do I have to do this? But during his time in the Ottoman Empire as this prisoner, as he called it, he learned things like art, philosophy, science, and horsemanship, swordsmanship, learned how to fight, but most importantly, he learned about torture. And this kind of drove what we know as Dracula today. So Vlad, he was a very powerful man at the time. He had this huge army. He swept across the lands, but he loved to torture people for some odd reason. And his main thing was to impale people and stick them in the ground and have them suffer for however long until they die. You can kind of relate this to Dracula as to kill Dracula, you kind of have to impale him. But what's important is kind of myths, legends, and things that came through Vlad. There were stories of Vlad the Impaler drinking his prisoner's blood because he thought it made him stronger. There's myths about him using the blood as like a dipping sauce for his bread. There's things about his army going across and eating the people that they killed because they didn't have enough food. And though these things be myths and legends and whatever you want to call them, that doesn't matter because it drove the story of Dracula. Everybody knows Dracula as the original vampire, the original kind of dark creature in history and in time. And we all know that to kill Dracula, you need to impale him. He drinks blood. He does terrible things to people because he wants to. But in recent history, in recent stories, I would say, not history, Dracula was this king, and he couldn't destroy his enemies. And he went to the devil and was like, hey, I'm kind of struggling here. What can you do for me? And he gave him power. And he said, there's to catch this power, you have to drink blood, and there's all this other stuff. And then there's this quote from a recent movie, the most recent Dracula movie, is people don't fear people, they fear monsters. So he became a monster. And if you think about Vlad and all the myths and stories that came from Vlad, he was kind of a monster. And I think Vlad the Impaler wanted that. He wanted people to fear him and not want to go to battle with him, and that's kind of how he won over all of these people, is through fear. Because if you think about it, you hear these stories about this army coming through, and they don't just kill you, they come over there and eat you. And whether that could have been like one person was hungry and ate a person, and it came to a story about the entire army eating people, can you imagine hearing that and being like, okay, why would we fight these people? They're just going to eat us. And then other stories about if you're captured, you're going to be impaled and suffer for a couple days until you die. And this horrible Vlad the Impaler uses my blood as a dipping sauce or decides to drink it because he believes it makes him stronger. So if you think about that, this kind of relates to Dracula, as in Dracula is kind of everything that Vlad, like the bad parts of Vlad, because in Romania before Vlad died, he was kind of a hero. He kind of brought people together in different parts of the world. He ended up bringing some type of peace to his land and all that kind of stuff. So what brought on all these terrible things and why were they overlooked before he died? You don't really think about, everybody thinks Vlad the Impaler as a terrible person, but like to the Romanians, he was pretty well known as a hero to them. So Dracula, being how he is, he was everything that encompasses the bad parts of Vlad the Impaler. As Vlad was when he was being able to torture and all that kind of stuff, he was going through all this terrible things that he considered terrible, but his brother did not. So when you think about this, what drove Vlad's kind of terrible thoughts about torturing people and to be able to do these terrible things, and then this one man that came up with Dracula twisted that story into something different and made a whole different kind of character out of Vlad the Impaler. And he made Dracula, one of the most kind of nightmares of some little children's stories and till today. And Dracula, it hasn't just evolved over time. He's kind of more myths and legends has come from Vlad the Impaler as we go through time, because first Dracula was a man that would just drink blood, and then he became a person that's fighting off other people that want to disband his thoughts and ideas, into like a man today where Dracula was just a troubled man that just wanted to destroy his enemy because they threatened him. So in the end, we think about where exactly Dracula came from. It's all the bad parts of Vlad the Impaler. It's not Vlad the Impaler himself, but the bad parts of him. And you kind of think about that, if you think about yourself, if you took about all the bad parts of you, who would you become? And what mythical creature could you become if you took out all those bad parts?